Okay, welcome everybody. This is our third Astley Media Project Positivity webinar, and the idea of these online events is to shine a light on the businesses, individuals and organisations who are facing up to this pandemic in different and new and sometimes inspirational ways. Last week we delved into the world of rugby, and this week we're focusing on football, and I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the manager of Exeter City, Matt Taylor, the long-serving or maybe suffering chairman, Julian Tagg, and somebody whose face may not be known to you, but his voice will be known to thousands, and that's Match of the Day commentator John Roeder. Good evening, gents.
Hi, Mark.
These events seem to fly by, so I'm just going to go straight in with asking the questions. Starting with you, Julian. When this all kicked off at Astley Media, we had to go to work from home pretty much straight away, but we're a relatively small team compared to the football club, and so it was fairly straightforward. How on earth do you go about putting an organisation as big as Exeter City FC into lockdown more or less overnight?
Well, for me and for everybody else, you know, it's a very, very, very steep learning curve. You know, you have to take it one step at a time. We've been here before. We're sort of very used to crises. We've been in any number of them. They're usually about. I'm getting some feedback, Mark. I don't know if there's a reason for that, but I'm getting some feedback in. I wonder if you can fix that. But you know, we've been in crisis a number of times. You know, we've been in a situation where there's a £4.8 million debt, so this is a walk in the park by comparison. That, you know, that's probably very flippant. You know, this is a very different sort of situation and very difficult. I think at the outset, just like everybody else, you know, you delve into your budgets, you look at what the connotations are, what are the possibilities, what are all the scenarios, what kind of planning can you do. And I think the same as everybody in any kind of business now, they'll be finding that they're doing, after they've done one budget pretty quickly, you know, there's an announcement, you have to do another one. And football's been exactly the same because, you know, everybody's dependent on going back to work, and we're dependent on getting back to football and getting back to, you know, supporters coming into the ground, because that's a major part of our budget. So without that, it gets very difficult. I mean, in the first instance, you know, everybody's thoughts, and Matt said it any number of times, you know, is look after your own, you know, to protect what you've got, protect those people and make sure that they're looked after, and then really prepare ourselves then as best we can for the future, and then try and deliver. But it's not been easy. As the government assistances unfold, you've got to maximise the use of those. And I think actually we're very lucky. It's not that long ago we were in a very, very desperate position. Because of the nature of the club and the trust and so on, we've made sure that we've got reserves, and that's one of the advantages. You know, there's no backup. We don't have any. We can't, you know, even when we had money in the bank, and we do at the moment, I hasten to add, you know, there's no bank loans available for us, and there's no, as everybody knows, there's nobody behind the sugar daddy as such, or mill owner, or whatever you like to call them, that's prepared to bail us out. So we've been cautious because of that reason. That stood us in very good stead now. I think there are a number in football, a lot of football clubs are in some serious difficulty now, and it wasn't that long ago that we were in the same space where we didn't get a game on a Saturday. We weren't paying the wages or the creditors on you know, during that week. So I think our past has helped us significantly.
I think we might have lost Julian there. He's seized up.
Yeah.
Let's just come on to Matt then, while we sort Julian's technical issues out. Obviously, Matt, a lot of what you do as players is face-to-face, you know, whites of eyes and all of that. You know, it's a team game, and everything you do is about the team and being together. How have the players faced up to the problem of not being able to come together, to train together in the way that you normally would, to sit on the coach with each other? How have they dealt with that?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's a difficult situation for everyone to be involved in. But in terms of the players, one thing from the communication we've had back from the players is that they're missing the training ground environment and the match day buzz, and the relationships that we have within the team environment at Exeter City. they're in lockdown in a certain situation which they've probably never been in terms of spending more time with their loved ones, which is great in some aspects. But they are elite athletes and they do want to train and do need to train. So it's certainly been a challenging time, but we've made sure they've got what we feel are the right things in place. To start with, it was very much a maintenance of fitness because we didn't know how long this would last for. But when it became apparent how long this was going to go on for, we gave them a slightly more tailored program, specifically designed to keep their lower limb strength and mobility going, and almost give them a bit of a physical and mental break from physical football fitness. So they could use the walks in the park and the downtime with the families as just nice light work, but maintaining some strength work. Because we've been away for so long now, we do expect there to be a mini pre-season before we start back the league campaign as well. So as long as we get a 2 to 3 week run before maybe a 6-week intense structure of fixtures, we're hopeful that the players will be in a fit enough condition to come back and be part of that. But we've certainly kept the lines of communication open with the players. Myself, Wayne Carlisle, Andrew, my two coaches, and Marcus Flitcroft, analysis bloke we got working with. I've made daily phone calls to the players, and we've made sure we've tried to keep tabs on all of them, and just jot down little notes to send to each of us. So we basically know what isolation looks like for each and every player. And every player's isolation looks different to the teammates. So some are finding it more difficult than others. Some are finding new hobbies and new areas of interest. But also the ones with the families and the younger families are also in a difficult situation because it's a worrying time for them.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Matt. But we will come back to the moment. Julian, welcome back. Your technical issues.
Great time for the Wi-Fi to go, so I could, it's got off the iPad for some unknown reason. So that's the technology that we're living with now.
That happened to me this morning. I was doing a webinar and it just came to me to deliver my bit, and it just crashed and kicked me out. But we're all learning through this experience, and it's part of the fun, isn't it? It doesn't have to be neat and tidy necessarily. But speaking of neat and tidy, John Roder, your commentaries always are. A bit like Matt and his boys. Yours is very much a team game, isn't it?
Absolutely. If I'm on a game for match of the day at the weekend, the TV crew could be 50, 60, maybe 70 people. If it's a game that's being shown live on BT or Sky, that could be around 100 people. And it's the camaraderie that I must admit I'm really missing. I'm missing football, but I'm missing the camaraderie. And I think Matt will emphasize with this, a lot of the former players that I work with as co-commentators, they say nothing can ever replicate that feeling of being in the dressing room together. But they say that working in television, because it's a team operation from the camera people to the sound people and everything, there is that sense of humor, there is that Mickey taking, if you like, and there is that teamwork together. And a lot of people who come into the media, and particularly television, they do say that actually it almost replicates the dressing room, but nothing ever quite will. And I'm missing that dreadfully.
Yeah, and you don't all shower together, do you? You watch it much of the day, guys.
We don't see each other. Would you believe I've actually never met Gary Lineker? I started on the programme in 2004 when I joined from ITV. And because we're always at a game, there's this fallacy that we do the commentary afterwards. And it's absolute nonsense. I travel from my home in South Devon to wherever I'm being sent to. So the last game that I was scheduled to do was at Norwich, although obviously I didn't go. So we go to Norwich, we do the 90 minutes commentary, we do the post-match interviews, and then we drive home, and it's all edited together up in Salford. And still some people think that we actually don't do it. And it's just ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
So the only thing you've got in common really then is the salary.
No salary at the moment at all. The thing is, I have 3 sources of income: football commentary, lecturing at Plymouth Marjan University. Obviously, the university is closed, and voiceovers and hosting events. I had the privilege of hosting an event for Exeter City a couple of years ago when Paul Merson and Ray Parlour came down to the Great Hall. So all that sort of stuff, all gone. The dog is getting a big, long walk every day.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Julian, you were talking about some of the challenges you faced. What surprised you most? What was the thing that you didn't expect that you had to deal with when all this kicked off?
Oh. Well, you never expect that, when the word comes through that, you've got to stop playing football, and, you spend all your life, literally, everybody does, whether they're in the office or outside, spend all your life getting to the end. We're getting very, very close. We've had a hugely successful season. And, when the bolt comes that says, you can't go to training, I think it was a Friday, Friday before the Saturday game, you can't go to the training, the whole thing just comes to a screeching halt. That's a massive shock to the system. And if ever your mind is going at 500 mile an hour at that point, of course you're thinking about, the realities of how dangerous the situation that we all find ourselves in is. But then, after you've sort of processed all of that, then you start to think about, how do we get out of this? So the line that suddenly said, and I think the realization that comes with, this could take, and it dawns on you, doesn't it? Day 2, 3 days, it starts to dawn on you, this is going to take some time. We're not getting out of this tomorrow. Then you start to look even closer than you already were about what's happening around the world. And then you start to think, okay, well, June, maybe July, maybe. And so it goes on. So the shock of that was the main thing. And then outside of that, how do you make the decisions that you've got to make? Who do you keep? Who don't you keep? Who do you... Fortunately, we've been able to pay everybody. So, some people are at home, and a lot of our people, I think, certainly Matt's people, are a vibrant bunch. They're probably bored to tears at home, being furloughed, but you have to do that. So it's almost, some people don't want to be furloughed, it's a strange situation. Most people, can I go home and not do anything and get paid in full? Well, there's a long queue for that one. But not necessarily in football, because everybody is so engrossed in what we're trying to achieve as a group of people.
Exactly. And Matt, I was watching your YouTube video earlier today, where you're talking great depth about how you're handling this situation. And I think a key thing that really struck me was the different situations your guys find themselves in.
Yeah.
We have this perception of footballers, driving around in Range Rovers, Verve Cleek, and living the high life. But the reality is a long way from that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we've probably got a group of 16 to 18 more senior figures within the playing squad, and then another group of probably a dozen young players who are just starting out with their careers. That they've got it all to come in terms of what their careers look like, but it's mainly managing the group of the senior ones. Obviously, within that group, there's going to be some players out of contract. There's going to be some players coming towards the ends of their careers. There's players who've got babies on the way. There's a baby born this week for Aaron Martin, our centre half. And everyone's situation is different. I alluded to that in that interview. And that's why we felt the wage deferral method that we went down was a fair one. We didn't want to do a single percentage across the board for each and every player, because every player is different. They all get paid different amounts as well. So we basically asked each player who's got a contract for next season what they could afford to defer. And the response we got was absolutely fantastic. And the big thing which came out of it for myself was how much trust the players had in the football club. Obviously, Julian touched on it there. We've had a positive season so far. This group of players are desperate for that season to finish and to finish well, and then to still doing the right things for this football club next season, whatever next season looks like. So it was a really positive response, and instead of us dictating to those players, that they still had the power to decline if they couldn't afford to defer any wages, or just to put an amount in which they could defer. And like I said, I was really pleased with the response we got.
Okay, good. Now that's that brings it all home, doesn't it? They're real people with real problems and real issues, and all of the things that we all face. John, what are you picking up from? You've got your finger on the pulse, your ear to the ground. What are you picking up from the world of football in terms of? There's been a lot of criticism, hasn't there, in the media of some of the bigger players and some of the salaries and some of the action they've taken. What's your take on all of that?
I think that's ridiculous for a start, simply because, as Matt has said, not all players are the same. Some players in the Premier League earn more in a week than 2 or 3 players in League One or League Two will earn in a year. And I think the PFA were absolutely right to say, actually, look at the amount of money that we contribute through our taxes, etc. What I'm hearing, because bear in mind I do mainly the Premier League, what I'm hearing is that there's no set date to come back. They keep penciling in dates, and when it does come back, I think it's been widely reported, hasn't it? Everything's going to be behind closed doors. But even, I'm sure Julian will have a viewpoint on this, even to put a match on behind closed doors, you still need a considerable number of people to ensure that that event actually goes ahead.
Yeah, you know, from the medical side to obviously the TV side is going to become very important, because, you know, the iFollow system that we have is actually a very good one. I mean, it's only the one you would know best, John. You know, that it is something that can be done, and the league is ready to do that. It's very unusual to be able to, you know, to push a button and to be able to run perhaps 30, 35 games. So you're quite right. And I was only speaking to Justin, our COO, today, and he'd been through with our safety people, looking at the numbers that we'd have there to run a game, even if it was outside. And the overhead is not, you know, everybody thinks there's no overhead. Well, you know, you still have your medical staff, etc. And the overhead was a lot more than perhaps, you know, as they went through it piece by piece, exactly as you say, John. So the one thing I think, you know, that I think everybody is hoping for from the TV point of view, that you know, the iFollow, if there is no football, and of course there isn't, and it is going to be behind closed doors, which everybody now probably accepts. They didn't at the beginning, you know, nobody was prepared, but now everybody realizes it's a fact. There is the opposite through the iFollow. You know, if you're sat at home on a Tuesday night or a Friday night, whether you're from Exeter or Carlisle, you might just decide to pay the £10 or so to watch the game. So it won't fill the gap. There's no doubt. You know, there's going to be, everybody's going to take a serious amount of pain in this, some more than others, but it might just go a little way to filling part of that. So there'll be a job for you, John. You know, there'll be some commentary going on.
Hopefully.
And let's hope you're in the middle of it.
I think the other thing, Mark, to mention is that, I mean, I've done, as you alluded to right at the start, tournaments around the world in my work for FIFA Television. So when you do an under-20 World Cup or an under-17 World Cup, quite frequently you're doing a game with very few spectators. If the host nation aren't involved for, say, an under-17 World Cup match or an under-20 World Cup match, there aren't many people who actually come along. And it's a very strange atmosphere to be actually at a competitive match-in where you can hear everything that is going on. And I wondered whether Matt had any viewpoint on that, because obviously, you know, it's going to be a bit like playing, I suppose, a reserve game, isn't it? And yet it's going to be a full first team game.
Definitely. And we don't know, it's always uncharted territory, really, especially with it being a league fixture with no one there to support us. Our home form generally has been quite strong this season. And you do get a heightened sense when you're walking out of the park and the big bank's full and they're in good voice. So, you know, every player's going to react differently to different situations, and that's one we're certainly preparing for. Luckily, I'd mentioned we're going to have a mini pre-season as such, and we'll play games behind closed doors, and that might even involve a game between ourselves at St James's Park. So we'll try and prepare the players as best we possibly can, but it will certainly be a surreal time. And there's, like Julian touched upon, there's various bits and pieces that the club are going to have to cover for these games to go ahead. And we've all watched those games. I was under 20 games, and I was at the Toulon tournament last summer. I think it was over in Marseille. And those games aren't great games to watch. There's no feeling in those games. You almost lose when there's no fans there. And maybe the players will lose a bit of an edge off the back of that. I'd like to think our players are motivated enough because the prize is there at the end of the season if they're successful. But every player is going to be different, and some players do thrive off different atmospheres.
And also the other thing, Matt, I guess, is that we often hear it phrased out that, you know, the season is a marathon, not a sprint. But at the end of this season, it's going to be a sprint, isn't it? Isn't it going to be the team who starts this? It's almost a little tournament, isn't it? And whoever starts strongest and is fittest and gets off to the best start will have the best chance of going up.
Definitely. That's exactly the way we see it. We basically see 3 games a week for a 6-week period. Survival of the fittest. If you've got a strong squad with players who can continually play 90 minutes at a certain intensity, because I know we're not living in a hot country, but the weather in possibly June and July will be different to the usual football conditions. So we do feel it be survival of the fittest, which is why what we're doing at the moment in terms of their physical programs that are going to be so important. And the players know for sure that if they come back in a good physical shape, they've got a better chance of playing and retaining the shirts as well. So we certainly see it like that. The tactical aspects of football in the next 10 weeks, I don't think will be too high in the back of we don't know what the opposition will be able to do in terms of the formations and the teams they're putting out. So we've just got to concentrate on ourselves, and we know we're at our best if we play high intensity football. So in some respects, we think it will suit us, but it remains to be seen if we can keep that going for a 9 or 10 game period session.
I've got a question here, Matt, from one of our attendees, Dan. Says, how do you replicate dressing room banter via Zoom when stuck at home? Very hard, impossible, I would guess.
Yeah, very difficult. I don't know if you've seen the press, but our players conducted a quiz one evening. So obviously they've took it upon themselves to do bits and pieces like that. I've spoke about the communication from the staff to the players. The S&C coach is basically communicating with the players on a daily basis, and the players are feeding back to the S&C staff on a daily basis in terms of what they've done. But nothing quite can replicate that changing room banter and the training ground environment. And I can assure you the players will be missing that. They'll be telling jokes to the young children, which they certainly won't be getting, and probably be a little bit too rude for them in terms of their age. But that's part and parcel of it at the moment. There's a lot of people in top positions in ourselves, and we've still got something to look forward to. And hopefully we can have a positive impact on something which has been such a difficult time for everyone.
Julian, you were speaking before we lost you earlier about that. You're spending a lot of time speaking to other chairmen. Are you closer to these people now? Are you working more as a team than you were before?
I think what's coming out and becoming very obvious that football it's not new news. There's always somebody in trouble. John will be reporting on clubs that sort of haven't paid wages, and that's at every level. And so there are some in every league. There are some that are very, very well off, and there's some that are really struggling for a whole variety of reasons. Where everybody saw the Notts County one, and everything gets very, very keenly reported in the press. The press are on to what's going on because the fans begin to know. So what you have found across the board, and what makes it even more difficult, is a lot of criticism of the football league. But I have to say, from what I've seen, they've done a pretty impressive job, because you have people at the top of the division perhaps have a different view of what might have to happen if you're in the middle or the bottom of the division. Bearing in mind, if you're at the bottom, you don't want to get relegated. So you have all these myriad of views of what should happen, and very often are a reflection of their own club at the time. You mix that with the financial position that they're in, that may well dictate where they actually feel. So that at any one time, the Football League is dealing with 72 clubs, and your position may be different because you sit at the top of the league. And if you were in the league, in a different league, or at the bottom of it, you would perhaps be, saying that we should be doing as a group something else. So you are getting a very interesting situation arising that. In football, there's a lot of very, very powerful individuals that are, they're very successful business people. They're used to getting their own way, and there may be a minority, but that doesn't stop them. I think you've seen just recently, the Sun reported that there was a crisis meeting of League Two clubs, and everybody wanted to finish the season. Well, as far as I know, that was 3 clubs, and the others were absolutely vehemently against it. But that didn't stop it going in the press. Yeah. So you can see. I think the vast majority want to work together as a group. They want to work with the players as a group. But of course, outside of this, there's this unknown factor that we're all having to deal with on a daily basis. And depending on your financial stability and this financial position that you find yourself in, will actually determine your level of desperation. And we're very lucky where we are now. But if this lasts as long as, the longer it goes on, the more uncomfortable I and many of the others will be getting. And bearing in mind and I've been there before, as I said earlier, I know what it's like, not to be able to pay wages on a Friday if you didn't get the Saturday. I've been out there with my welly boots, with trying to get a game on where it's nearly flooded, knowing full well it's not going to happen, but just desperate to get that income. So you are finding, you're quite right, across, everybody that has exactly the same issues, and in the same competition, are in very, very different places and spaces. So the job that the Football League has, and the football authorities in general across the board, is extremely difficult. And again, there's always this unknown factor of what's going to happen next, and we're all behind what the government ultimately tell us we can and can't do.
Does that mean, therefore, that at this time of year, a club like Exeter City will be planning already for next season? But obviously, are you having to make extra plans? Because let's face it, the season could resume. Exeter City hopefully will get promoted. The season could resume and you could stay in League Two. The season might get abandoned, or we might just be in this nowhere situation as far as football is concerned, because obviously, as you say, the health of the nation is far, far more important. Have you got about 7 different scenarios that you're working on all at the same time?
Well, you're exactly right. I did mention very briefly, but every time you do a budget, you need to do another one. And, you know, I mean, I'll answer your question to a degree. You're quite right. It's multifaceted. So it's changing all the time. And even in our own, you know, within our own groups and our own boardrooms, there's an opinion that says, you know, it might finish tomorrow or it might finish in a year's time. And my point being that, you know, everybody has a different view, perhaps. But I mean, the one who has the biggest task, and you can ask, you know, Matt sat there at the other end, you can ask him. He's the one. We would have been doing that anyway. We would be a long time down the road. Matt would have been planning. You know, I'm only smallly involved. He only really tells me what's going to happen, and is
right
it possible? So that's how it works usually. But he's got a team of people doing what you say. So Matt, that's you know, whilst we do that, and we're planning on but if you like, on a macro scale across the board, and we were anticipating what sort of numbers are going to come in. We anticipate how many away fans will be coming if we're in this league, what in the next, you know, how many will be coming in the, what's the gate going to look like, what's the income. So all that stuff has just almost gone out the window. So there's a mountain of work, never mind the work that Matt is doing.
That brings me on to a question here from Jay, who says, do you think there's a possibility that some clubs will not make it out of this situation, and when play does start again, that they won't be able to field a full team? I guess that's one for everybody, really.
Well, I'll go very quickly and then Matt, but yeah, from what I see, and I'm on the, you know, I sort of get the inside track. I'm very surprised we haven't seen somebody going into administration yet. So Jay, you know, Jay's, if that's Jay Milling, he's lived through it with us. So he's seen it. So I'm very surprised that there hasn't somebody already gone into administration, probably because of the circumstances have held them up. But I would be very surprised if there's not 2 or 3 that find themselves in exactly the position Jay outlines. And in terms of playing, Matt would know. Matt would know sort of sponsors on.
It will all depend on when the finish of the season is. If it's in the time where players are still contracted, we fully expect the clubs to honour those contracts in terms of playing their strongest teams. People talk about the credibility of the league, and that's the reason why we want the league to be finished. Players have still got to play their strongest possible teams. So there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of when the season will get finished and what the contractual situations will be, and who will have to extend certain contracts after the 30th of June. But you'd like to think that there's a reason for players to play football, and that's one thing which is apparent from our group. Obviously, we want to get promoted and we want to have a successful season, but there's going to be a lot of players who are out of contract at the end of this season, whenever it is, and they need to somehow secure contracts for their future as well. So even the mid-table teams are going to have a lot of players playing for their futures, and that's one thing which is apparent in terms of all aspects of football and all standards of football as well.
In terms of players, Mark, there's a lovely tweet that has been retweeted by Exeter's official Twitter account. And there's a young lad called Ben Sidway Lee, and he has been doing his homeschool task today, which is about direction. And I'm just reading it now, he's drawn a map of a town. And various players, we could actually turn this into a quiz actually, which player owns the fish shop in his imaginary town? Fish shop.
Oh, yeah, Alex
Fisher, yeah. And so Matt Taylor, you've actually got quite a nice shop that young Ben has given you. What do you reckon it might be?
Suit shop of some sort.
Might be making garments.
It's not bad. It's coffee shop and patisserie. So there you are. You're all sorted for that. But that's a lovely bit of thing, and that leads me on to just wonder how important it is for Exeter as a club. I mean, I know that every club wants to communicate with its supporters, but how important is it for you to keep those lines of communication really on top of everything at the moment?
Yeah, we have an exceptional group of people that run our social media. There's a lad called Scott Palfrey, Simon Larkins, who I expect Mark will know. We're very, very lucky because not only do they do that, and we haven't furloughed him for exactly the reason, John. So lots of clubs will have done that, but we didn't, because of exactly what you said, the importance of keeping in touch with the fans, keeping them up to date with what's going on, because that doesn't change. In fact, it actually becomes more intense. There's been some absolutely superb videos that they've put out. They've revisited just about every game, and I mean, I've watched the highlights of a lot of them as well, and thoroughly enjoyed it, I have to say. You think, oh God, you know, but going back through the Oxford game and the Torquay game and some of the Wembley ones haven't been quite so good to watch, but one or two have. So I've really enjoyed that, and it was a conscious effort on the part of the club. And you know that, and there was a cost involved, because you're quite right. Engagement with the fans, and they're exceptional at it, is vital. And the same really goes in the city community, the trust, city community trust side. You know, making sure that we are there and available to those people that need us right now in more ways than one, not just in the football fix way, but also in terms of what other things we are doing for the city on behalf of the community, to work with them to keep up the health and well-being levels of our community. So yeah, you're quite right, John, very important. And it was one of the decisions you talk about, Mark, that we made very early on, that's what we would do. Yeah, I think our players have been really good with that too, because through Matt, they've all got involved, and they're a major part of that. So I know Scott's been doing a lot with the players, right?
And just things like tonight, really grateful that you've joined us this evening. You're busy people, and giving up 3/4 now of your evening to communicate with people. I think that says a lot about you all. Which brings me on to another question, which says, really encouraging to see how positive people are despite what's going on. Can I have their top tips? This is for all panelists. Your top tips for staying motivated and positive. Let's start with Matt. Motivation.
In terms of motivation, I'd just say have some sort of structure to your day. Have some sort of structure in terms of you've got to have a reason to get up in the morning. Try and get the timing right for when you do your physical work, even if it's a walk or a bike ride or sitting out in the garden, and get that fresh air in your lungs. But having a meaningful structure as well, so having a purpose behind it. Everyone needs a focus. Our players have got a simple focus. They need to keep fit and ready for the season to resume. But in terms of everyone else, it's something to look forward to and something to work towards as well. So having a clear structure and a focus within that structure is hugely important. And also maybe trying to learn some sort of new skills or new hobbies, or trying to use your time wisely to maybe do something which you've always felt you haven't had the time to do in the past. It's a huge one for, people won't be sat at home just twiddling their thumbs. They'll always find something to do. Unfortunately, there's all various different aspects in terms of laptops and social media and phones at their disposal. And you can get into bad habits off the back of that. So even a social media ban or a ban of laptops and phones and televisions might just force you into something different.
Excellent. John, how about you?
I have basically tried to do something different, as I've explained earlier. For obvious reasons, there is no work. The dog takes the humans for their daily walk at about 4:30. We're very lucky. We live near the beach in South Devon, so she'll take us there. And I've actually started a course where I'm learning how to teach online English as a foreign language. So at the end of that, I will get a TEFL certificate, or a TESOL certificate, which is teaching English as a secondary language. I'm about a quarter of the way through that. It's a 120-hour course, which is actually provided by a company in Exeter. So I've kept it local, I've kept it down here. And it's quite interesting to do that. And it is challenging because basically because of an underlying medical condition, I can't go out and get another job, much as I might like to, or volunteer for the NHS. I'm afraid I can't do that. So I'm doing this online course, just as Matt said. So yeah, hopefully in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'll have actually finished that and be qualified and have a certificate to hang on the wall.
Excellent, excellent.
You can teach Matt some English. That northern drawl, sometimes I don't understand what he's saying, so perhaps you can do some work on that. What I do really, I say to people, I don't think I've ever been so busy yet so unproductive. It's a very strange So for me, that, you know, the motivation is still there to come back as strong as you possibly can. And I think that works in all walks of life, no matter what you're doing. You know, can you, and I think the key to life is organization. So, you know, organizing yourself, your house, everybody around you, and as Matt says, you know, organizing your day and things that you can do. Mine are full, so I don't really think about that much. But I do say that there's, you know, you've got to find a silver lining in every disaster. So, you know, some of the things that I've been able to do, again, like you say, you know, out on my bike today, you know, I met Matt today, you know, because we had to look at the various aspects of the ground, things that we want to do during this period. And I wouldn't normally have that. I've been out in the car and back again, and so, you know, and on to the next meeting. So that's been a real sort of silver lining for me that that I've been able to get. I need a lot more yet, but some more exercise than I usually get. Let's put it that way.
I do wonder actually whether we often hear, Matt, we often hear managers sort of say, oh, you know, I dream a lot. I wake up, I'm thinking about team formations all the time. With obviously no definite start back, are you still dreaming about football and your team selections and who you should play and all sorts of things like that? Or have you managed to just be able to turn off a little bit from it?
It's interesting. I've been able to turn off from the actual football aspect of it, but not turn off from the players and the club, because there's still so much, similar to what Julian said, so much planning and processes being put in place. It's strange. We are busy at the moment, and similar to what Julian alluded to, every message or every phone call, every email has a trail before it and after it as well. And you've got to keep following through. So it's so important that the main aspect of my job at the moment is communicating with the players and the staff, and just being there for them to relay any fears or any worries they've got or any issues they've got. But there's also a lot of planning in place. You mentioned before about the scenarios we're looking forward to. We start planning the following season's playing squad probably from November time of the previous season. We've got our budget in place. So the moment this happened, obviously we started to look towards different scenarios as well. If the budget was frozen, if we had a smaller budget, if we were to use our younger players more so, even the ones who we didn't quite feel were ready yet. So when there's so many unanswered questions, you're always searching for answers, and that's certainly one thing which has been apparent in the last sort of few weeks is how busy we've been, and my staff have been exactly the same, and they've been fantastic in terms of their attitude to make sure we are as prepared as we possibly can be when we get back. There'll still be bits and pieces which we won't have covered because we just won't have thought of them, but we are certainly trying to cover all bases.
Yeah, I only mentioned dreaming about football because I had a dream that I was late for a game yesterday, and I literally turned up, and I didn't know which team was which, and there was a goal in the first minute, and I didn't know who'd scored it, and I didn't know which team it was, and it was one of those frequent dreams that you have about your jobs, and I just wondered whether you still had those or not.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, it's different. I mean, I had similar dreams of certainly when I played of either turning up late and not being able to quite get there. So that's a bit of probably anxiety in terms of a sport related thing. But you still have a football on your mind 24/7, and we are trying to get a bit of a mental break from the actual pressure of 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. But then there's different pressures which are taking over us as well. So that's part and parcel of working in sport and being in a leadership sport.
On that theme, John, I mean, a lot of us are, you know, every day brings the unexpected. We're having to be spontaneous and deal with things we didn't think we'd have to deal with. Give us an anecdote. When was a time, you know, during your career when something's gone horrendously wrong and you've had to sort of just front it up?
There was actually one at the 2018 World Cup. I work for FIFA at World Cups. I do what's called the world feed. So my English language commentary goes to many, many countries all around the world. And I did it's one of the top 5 games I've done. I did Spain 3, Portugal 3 in Sochi, where Cristiano Ronaldo scored a hat-trick with the 3rd goal with the free kick. I just said genius, pure genius. They actually replayed it on the FIFA YouTube channel the other week. And the short edit has had something like 78 million views, all with my voice on, which is quite amazing. But in Russia, at that World Cup, the number 17 and the number 11 on the back of the shirts looked pretty similar. And Spain brought on the number 17. I can't remember which way around it was. Spain brought on the number 17, but I read it as 11 from my vantage point. So I'm going, you know, I can't remember his name. Here's Paulo Sancho. Come on. And I mentioned him 5 times. And then 5 minutes later, the other number came on. And so actually Paulo Sancho was coming on. and I had to sort of get out of that one. You know, it was a bit like, this commentator is reversing. It was very, very embarrassing. Very embarrassing.
Yeah, and difficult to keep going, I guess, when that's all going on.
No, you've got to keep going. It's a live broadcast. You're going live to, you know, countries all around the world. No, you just got to, you know, you've got to front up and not exactly admit your mistake, but not refer to it. It's the same if you're doing a game where I do a lot of French League games for BT Sport, and I used to do a lot of Italian games for Channel 4 when it was on Channel 4 and things. We never went to the actual countries, so you never say that you're there, but you never say that you're not there. So if you're doing, I don't know, the Rome Derby in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, you'd say, you know, it's been a warm day in Rome today, 22 degrees centigrade, which is fact. But you don't say, it's been a lovely day as I strolled around, you know, by the Colosseum in Rome, because you're not there, kind of thing. So there's little tricks to doing football commentary. And whether you're doing radio or television, it's quite interesting, because radio, you're very important because you are the voice. So all the guys on Radio Devon, etc., they're important. On television, you're not so important. You know, you can have a game and it can just be shown, and you don't need somebody jabbering away in the corner. Or hopefully they're not jabbering away. Hopefully they're adding and entertaining and informing.
And speaking of curveballs, one for Matt and Julian, this lockdown has come just at a time when City pushing for promotion, decent run of form, good position. How much of a psychological blow is that? Go to Matt first.
It still remains to be seen. It's ironic, actually. Our worst bit of form came just before the suspension of the league. We hadn't won in 4 games. We'd drawn 2 and lost 2. And we just hit a bit of a sticky patch in terms of our form. And obviously we're having a few issues with our home pitch as well. So if it had been a shorter break, you might have said it came at the right time. But one thing which is in our minds is that generally we've started seasons pretty well over the last couple of years. Certainly since my time returning to the club, we've been fit at the start of the season, and we've always started well for 9-10 games. So that's something which is in our minds, and we're confident with our plan in place, which is basically mirrors what we've done in the past few pre-seasons. So we understand the players have to be fit. They're certainly going to be motivated, but there's a lot of unexpected twists which are going to come on the back of pressure. Pressure might feel slightly different in front of no fans and so on, like we've discussed already. But the prize is still the same, and then that's a huge prize at the end of it in terms of promotion. And that promotion could certainly affect the club in such a positive manner financially. It will affect the community and affect the city as well. And it's something we've worked so hard for now for the best part of 18 months. So, players will be motivated, players will have an end goal, but there's still a lot of planning and processes to be put into place and then implemented.
Thank you, Matt. Julian?
Yeah, you can't get away from gutted, really. You know, you get this far through, you've had a successful season, played some good football as a good team. We've had some very unfortunate injuries and things along the way. Matt's done an absolutely brilliant job. If you'd have said this at the beginning of the season, if you were there at this point, you know, we're still on and still have the opportunity automatic, which, you know, if you don't go automatic and you go into the playoffs, you know, that takes a big chunk out of the summer recess where where Matt can't plan. You know, it actually makes the year after really difficult. So if you do happen to be good enough to go automatically, that's a huge plus in every way. Apart from you get less income because you're not in the games, of course, that's the other factor. So you can't help but being, after all that effort, and you know, and to get to get so well placed that, you know, you'd have to mess up pretty bad, or Matt would, although, you know, it's possible things have happened to not be at least in a playoff position. And that's what you're trying to do every year. You know, it's Matt's team now, he's got them there and they're close. And I think, you know, from my point of view and his, you know, that's what you're testing yourself to see, you know, can you do, and especially with the budget that we've got, you know, that's, you know, another reason why you have to take your chances while you can. So, you know, whilst I'd like to be philosophical and of course, you know, Shankly's famous quote, you know, it's it's much more important than you know, football's much more important than anything else.
it's not, of course, you know, there is a bigger picture and you have to take that into consideration. It's not life and death. I think that's what he says. Not life and death. It's much more important than that. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Perhaps I didn't. So you know, put it all into context, and you have to look at that. But you know, Yeah, I'm disappointed for the players. I'm disappointed for Matt himself, for the, you know, the fans who've turned up right the way through and got very, very close to something. You know, yet another fantastic season. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm not. You know, I'm gutted by it all. But I actually, the funny thing is that I seem to enjoy most being in difficult situations. You know, that's when you get the, you know, that's when you go into overdrive, and you know, sometimes the more difficult the situation, the bigger the challenge, and we've got another one. So that's I don't look forward to that, but I think we're well equipped to deal with it.
Appreciate your honesty as always, Julian. We're into our last minute, so just going to finish off by asking you to tell me in one sentence what you're looking forward to most once the lockdown is over. Start with John.
To pick up on Julian's thing, Arrigo Sacchi said football isn't very important, but of the things that aren't very important in life, it is the most important. And I think that basically sums it up. I'm really looking forward to football coming back. Obviously, that's all with the proviso of everybody getting better, etc., etc. But I'm really looking forward to it coming back and being able to go to games again, which I must admit, I'm very lucky. I'm a member of the media. I'll be able to do that, unlike a normal Exeter City supporter.
Thank you, John. Matt?
Very similar, really. Getting back to the daily routine at the training ground. We're lucky we work with some fantastic people in terms of the staff we've got, but also a really good set of players in terms of the character. And I think that's shown through, certainly in the last few weeks in difficult times. And Julian just mentioned it there. And if there's one positive to come out of this such difficult situation, it sort of underlines that our structure and the way the club is run is up there with the very best.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. And Taggy, finally?
Well, you know, what you do realise is, you know, even though football is really important to an awful lot of people. So, you know, I'm looking forward to even though actually it's a bit strange, isn't it? Because it's sort of torture watching the games until. I like it when we're 4-0 up, Matt. If you can organise that every week, then it's actually quite enjoyable for that. So, I mean, getting back to the football, but then I think equally is going out afterwards, you know, when you've won a game with a group of people. I enjoy that too. So, you know, those two things are the bits that I'm probably going to miss most. Simple things, but the most important to me anyway.
Sure, great. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. If you need another Exeter City fix, there's some great stuff on the website. As Julian said, the media team there are working their socks off to bring content out. There's a great interview with Matt, all about this subject, 35-minute long interview, I think it is, which is fascinating, well worth a watch. Really appreciate your time. Good luck. Let's hope this is over. The sooner the better, and then we can all get back to normal. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers, Mark.
Bye.
Thank you.